it works, I guess, more easily in smaller groups. If you have a large group, it's quite complicated. And of course, if you want to have 19 countries in the Eurozone agreeing on how to deal with the economic crisis or situation in Greece, then it's getting a very complicated consensus process, as we have seen over the past few weeks. But somehow it's the same kind of mechanism we're talking about, but on different scales maybe. But I assume that if we wanted to have some kind of environmental problem ranking across Europe, we would be somewhere caught up in a similar situation where so many people want to have their say, so it will be an extremely complicated story to do. The relation to environmental standards is a little bit going half the way on a similar process, because then you start with more or less already existing consensus processes, or let's say political processes that have been underlying certain environmental targets or sustainability objectives or whatever. And then you can, let's say, as an LCA practitioner, you go from the other side. So you come from the technological system side, and try to relate the inputs and outputs that you have in your system to these targets that were already preset for, let's say, the European Union or for your country of concern. It's doable. I've myself written a couple of papers related to that. Again, you can always argue whether it's the right thing to do or not. Basically, you can do it on two different, concepts. One is then relating to these national, or it might be regional political targets, which obviously by nature is a kind of compromise, because it's a political decision anyway. Then there have been attempts in the past, and also more recently, to look at what are the actual planetary boundaries or the national ecological targets for certain pollutants, and try to relate your impacts to that. And if you are aware of the Swiss eco-point method, it belongs to this category, basically. The third approach is maybe the most controversial one in a sense, but it's also the one that makes a lot of sense if you want to discuss environmental impacts with real economists, because they are so familiar with dealing with monetary values, and this is why it's very useful in some cases. What you do essentially is you try to establish some cost for the environmental damage in terms of the economic value of the cost, and you can also then connect the environmental and health aspects to other socio-economic issues. So that's, like I said, the most important, I think, point to make there. Then there are some examples in the literature about such methods, and I will give you a couple of examples on that soon. Next, please. But there are also some non-LCA applications of monetarization. So basically where the LCA community builds the LCA methods on is from other parts where monetarization of these kind of externalities that these economic impacts are considered come from. Okay, maybe one among the most well-known ones, and one that really in recent years triggered the interest for this monetarization of environmental impacts was the Stern report, where he actually calculated on behalf of the British Chancellor Gordon Brown the costs related to counteracting the effects of global warming, and comparing, of course, with the damage impact that the climate change will have to the economy. So basically, the statement in the end was that it would be much better from an economic point of view to society to act now, and therefore, and by acting now, we would only have to pay a little money compared to what the cost would be to let the damage happen. Okay, next please. Yeah, this is what I said now. And the other, let's say, I guess most well-known project in this area that's outside the LCA domain is the TEB study that was titled The Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity. So you, like it said, it was inspired by the Stern review and it focused specifically on the loss of ecosystems and biodiversity. I will not go into detail, I just want to mention these two examples of studies that have inspired the LCA community to work more on this monetarization approach. Having said that, we should also acknowledge that also within the LCA community there has been a lot of monetarization work going on, and there was, let's say, a series of projects, essentially starting with the XME project in the 1990s that has advanced this science quite a lot. Next, please. We skip that one. Okay, next. This is not needed. Yeah. Just a specific example of where cost-benefit analysis actually comes into play in environmental policies, which might be useful to know about. There is something on the EU level called the National Emissions Ceilings Directive, and so it basically states that member states should have kind of a cap or emission ceiling for emissions of certain substances, and then the cost and the benefits of having such a cap or emission ceiling is actually calculated in order to, and sometimes it's a little bit different from country to country, but basically you can then find some kind of optimum level where the environmental benefits are more or less balancing the extra cost that you have for emission abatements. Okay, next please. Yeah, I already mentioned this as an overview, but I will give you a few examples. Next. It's apparently the same again for whatever reason, so just keep it. This one is better. Yeah, I know why. I cut away some slides and then I'll need to take this all back to where we were. Okay. Here is a list of various method acronyms or names in the LCA arena, and then I've tried to characterize them in terms of where they, how they are designed in terms of the indicator basis and in terms of the weighting basis. And as you can see, there are some differences on different methods, but it's kind of a common approach that if you are dealing with monetarization, you more or less need to go to the endpoint. So the endpoint is to look at the actual damage of the influenced species, like if you have a health impact, that's kind of endpoint. So it's more complicated or not even possible to put direct monetary value on acidification as a physical mechanism. Okay, that's good enough. Now this one is just an example then how these methods actually come out in numbers. And this example is for Sweden. It's a bit boring that I stick to Sweden, of course, but it's easier for me to deal with that, and the example would be very similar, at least the concept or the outcome would be, maybe the numbers would be different in other countries, but this is, like I said, an example. Basically what you do in a political target weighting is that you have to find out somehow in policy what is the reduction that's wanted until a certain target year, and relate that to some kind of reference year, and play around with the numbers, if I may say so. So in this particular case, we knew that the Swedish reference emissions in 1990 were 90,000 kilotons of carbon dioxide and other emissions leading to global warming impacts. And until the year 2010, so these are already old numbers, but never mind, the emission target for global warming gases was 8%. So if you then convert 8% to a reduction factor, it means that you have a 1.1 reduction factor. So essentially the reduction factor is also the weight factor that you put on these emissions that are entering the GWP category in a life cycle assessment. And then when you do the same analysis for the other categories, you come up with then different types of reduction factors. And it gives you the relative importance of the different emissions coming out of your product system. Obviously you have also a kind of target emission based on the reference emission and the reduction target. So that's